This is me, very confused. Because for the past 8 months, I have been doing an experiment in learning Baroque Harpsichord Continuo. Why? Because I want to see if I can overcome a weakness in my perfect pitch. If you know anyone with perfect pitch, they most likely have this weakness too. Now let me explain a few things so that everyone's on the same page. Perfect pitch. It's the rare ability to be able to tell what note is playing without any preparation. Just like how normally if you saw these pictures, you can instantly see that, oh yeah, the tree is green, or the banana is yellow. It's like instant and you don't have to think about it, it's just a fact. And it's kind of like this for perfect pitch. Like this, it's always A. You can never mistake it for another note like this or this. However, there's one massive problem. This only works if we tune to A equals 440 Hertz as the reference pitch. What does this mean? Well, it's more accurate to say that people with perfect pitch hear wiggly air per second rather than the note names. This is the note A. When you hit this note, the air will wiggle 440 times a second. We call this 440 Hertz, aka our A reference pitch. All you need to know is that most music nowadays follows this tuning with A set to 440 Hertz. However, during the Baroque period, A wasn't standardized. Some people tuned all their music to A equals 392 Hertz, and some also tuned to A equals 415 Hertz. For example, an A at 415 Hertz would sound like this. So here, when I played that A note with the A415 tuning, that A was wiggling at 415 times per second. People with relative pitch won't really mind this, but people with perfect pitch will be able to notice the different amount of wiggling, and it makes it off by a semitone, sounding like a G sharp. To go back to that color analogy, it's like you're seeing this tree as orange and this banana as purple. And you know it's supposed to be green and yellow, but no matter what, you physically can't see it as green or yellow. Now imagine listening or playing to a whole piece like this. Every single color doesn't really match what your brain expects, making the music feel wrong or unsettling, especially if you look at the score as well, because your brain is constantly trying to correct the notes that they're hearing. So if you do a quick search on Google with perfect pitch and Baroque tuning, you can see lots of people with perfect pitch getting absolutely dunked on by this, to even precedent of performers losing their perfect pitch from this frequent exposure. With all this context on how it seems to be perfect pitch's greatest weakness, I'm gonna see if I can overcome it. For the next 8 months, I will be tormenting my own perfect pitch by learning a Baroque instrument called the harpsichord and a style of playing it called continuo. Of course, all in Baroque tuning. I'll document my progress leading up to the final exam. This is what happened. The first week was a pain. In 415 Hz tuning, playing even something as simple as a major scale was so disorienting. And keep in mind, the harpsichord has a keyboard layout. It's the same as the piano. Bro, I even tried playing some piano pieces that I previously learned. For example, I know the Bach C# major Well-Tempered Clavier by heart. But the moment I play on 415, the C# major sounds like C major, which makes me try to shift my fingers down a half step, but that just makes it play the wrong note because it's the wrong note. Like, comment below if like making sense, or like if I'm just sounding like a raving delusional maniac. This pretty much continued into week 2, but I did find out that the harpsichord has 2 settings. If you remove this block over here, you can change the harpsichord back and forth from 415 to 440 Hertz. So right now, I'm shifting the keyboard to the right to 440 Hertz. Now I'll shift the keyboards to the left to 415 Hertz, and yeah, see the difference. Now it's because the keyboard, once shifted, will be plucking a different pitch string 1/2 step away to the left or to the right. So I formulated a new strategy. Number 1, practice in 440 Hertz on the harpsichord so I can get used to the different feeling of playing it, because there's differences in like key touch and resistance. And secondly, I would then practice on a digital piano. Yeah, you heard me right. digital piano. Now hear me out. Some digital pianos can change their sound from a piano to a harpsichord, like this. And secondly, some digital pianos can also have the ability to change their tuning. As you can see here, this is how it sounds at 440 Hz. However, we can configure this to go down to 424-ish Hz. And finally, we can go all the way down to Baroque tuning 415 Hz. You see how this sounds like way lower? We can configure how low the pitch change can go. So the strategy was to start off in 440 Hz, then every day I would decrease my piano tuning by about 1 Hz. At this rate, after 25-ish days, I should be able to reach 415 Hz and hopefully slowly trick my brain into getting used to it, 1 Hz at a time. And so it began. The initial days worked out great. It felt like normal playing. I was able to cross the around 432-ish range with a bit of difficulty. It sounded a tiny bit weird, like all the pitches were out of tune, but I could still trick my brain into thinking that it was just a slightly out of tune a 440 Hz. This required a lot of brain power to do, and this was slowly becoming an issue because at the same time, I was learning Harpsichord Continuo. Basically, it's a type of playing where if harpsichordists see a bass line like this, they can instantly already infer that this is supposed to be the chords above. Or if they're in another position or inversion, they can do this. Or even this. Like what? They can automatically do all the correct voice leading on the spot, such as avoiding parallel fifths, etc., just from seeing a bass line. At an advanced level, harpsichordists can even improvise ornamentations or embellishments on the spot while maintaining all of the voice leading rules. Like what? That's so cool! Even just learning the basics of this, I was barely surviving, since it uses up a lot of mental energy in the minds to remember all of the different figurations and not accidentally do things like have parallel fifths or parallel octaves. But on top of all of this, my brain also had to divide attention to the pitch tuning. And eventually, I hit that wall. It was around the 422 to 426 Hertz range where I felt like any more going down and it would just be impossible to hear an A as an out of tune A and only hear it as a G sharp instead. I'm guessing it's because if you're looking at a continuum of sounding closer to a G sharp versus sounding closer to an A, 422 Hertz was already closer to a G sharp than to an A. As a result, if I played an A note, I truly couldn't think that it was just an out of tune A anymore, but I kept hearing it as a very sharp G sharp. I kept trying for another week, but I couldn't seem to overcome this hurdle. As the days went on, I was making some progress on the harpsichord, but this was only when it wasn't at 415 Hz. For my actual harpsichord exam, I would be playing continuo while accompanying a Baroque recorder player, which was always tuned to 415 Hz, so no matter what, I had to somehow manage to switch from 440 to 415 by then. I still couldn't really manage to go below that wall of like the 422 range, and yeah, I kind of got more desperate as time went on. For a period of time, I only listened to music in Baroque tuning and also looking at the scores while listening to these period instruments. I even tried playing the piano, which was at 440, at the same time as I was listening to music at 415, which was interesting. Yeah, I don't really know what came over me during that time. I was, in hindsight, probably overthinking a lot. There was this sort of conflict with wanting to obviously learn continuo and understand Baroque pitch, but also this question always in the back of my mind of would I actually lose or break my perfect pitch? I haven't mentioned this yet, but this is important to state that a while before starting this challenge, I had the experience of losing my perfect pitch. I'm not sure if lose is the correct word, because technically it was worse than that. It shifted, which, yeah, I think that's worse than losing it. So for context, I had wisdom teeth surgery, and maybe it's because of the medication, maybe because of the area around my jaw, ear, region got inflamed or from the teeth being removed. But for the next week after that surgery, my pitch shifted. I actually recorded all of this just to document what was happening. Honestly, yeah, it was legit kind of too low energy to make into a full video. It's been about 48 hours since I had the wisdom tooth surgery, and yeah, I just now tried playing on my digital piano that's tuned to A440, but I don't know, it just sounds a little flat. Yeah, I think my pitch shifted around 7 to 10 hertz from 440. I would like to hope that it's only my digital piano pranking me, but I've listened to some recordings of piano and also my own compositions, and they all sound a tiny bit lower in pitch than usual. I'm pretty stressed right now. It just feels so weird. I really hope this isn't permanent. It was really demotivating during that time because just playing the piano sounded off. Trying to compose sounded off. Like, what I heard in my head was not what came out on the instruments. Listening to my familiar compositions or recordings sounded off. I was really thankful that during around day 5, my pitch perception slowly started pushing back to around A440 hertz. But I think my pitch might be still off by a couple hertz. It felt kind of like, once again, that color analogy I was talking about, but I was forced to having colors permanently different 24/7. I mean, it affected me still so much that even months later, while I was preparing for Continuo, like, this was going through my head as the exam was looming closer. I'm not sure if people realize how losing perfect pitch by having it shift is a very psychological thing for the person. I feel it's important also to share the impact it can have on someone who's going through something like this. Okay, this was a bit heavy. So while all of these worries were going through my head, and as the exam was looming closer, all of a sudden, something really weird happened. Honestly, it was rather anticlimactic. I wish there was some sort of boss battle, like a moment of triumph, maybe in the middle of playing in an exam or something epic, but no. I just woke up one day, sat down, and played, and didn't find the tuning weird. I don't really know how else to describe it. It's more like I could play and listen, but if I thought about it too much, it would disappear and I would start to play wrong notes again. But if I didn't think of the pitches, I wouldn't find out that they sounded different. It's very weird to describe. I could play a bunch of music and it would usually work if I was already familiar with the piece. So it could have been just muscle memory with my fingers, or maybe because I was familiar with the tune, it was sort of like hearing the music in tinted lens, or like stained glass, or you know, like how there's old paper is kind of yellow, it's like faded yellow. I was getting that kind of vibe. So the moment I was able to play on 415, I was also slightly worried at this point. Did it mean that my perfect pitch was on its way to become permanently shifted? I didn't really know, but to me then, it was also very satisfying when something I'd been trying so hard all of a sudden just clicked. I still heard in 440 tuning, but over the course of the next month, I gradually got used to the harpsichord at A415 hertz tuning. I still had to ignore the pitches or force myself to hear it as a blurry tinted sepia, but I was gradually getting used to it. In hindsight, I realized what this was. Relative pitch. It pains me to say this, but all throughout my childhood and in learning music, my relative pitch had always been kind of trash. I wouldn't be confident enough to say that it was non-existent, but it was certainly very, very weak. You know, whenever you have those oral listening tests, you're supposed to hear the quality of the chord, right? Nah, for me, I always just wrote down all the pitches, then visually thought of what the chords might be from those pitches. And you know how people might memorize the quality of the intervals just by the song? For example, the first two notes of Amazing Grace. That's how you get, like, perfect fourth. You memorize that interval. I never paid much attention to hearing the interval, and in the oral listening exams, if they played two notes, I would just write out the pitches and manually calculate, okay, so what's the interval? Is it major, minor, perfect? I'm not sure if this is just me being super lazy and weird, but I would wager that I'm not the only one who might do this. This is my theory, but in general, I think it is sort of easier to cheese your way through all of these ear training steps. However, because you do this, people with perfect pitch never truly develop as strong of a relative pitch compared to those who don't have perfect pitch. Remember how perfect pitch hears wiggly air? Relative pitch people hear the ratio differences between two wiggly airs. They don't need an exact pitch reference to know what sounds like a major sixth, for example, because they just perceive the difference. And my theory is, at this point of somehow being able to get used to Baroque pitch, I finally, embarrassingly enough, started to truly obtain and strengthen my relative pitch. Finally, joining the ranks of a skill that, like, 99% of all the musicians have. Throughout this time, I kept grasping this weird feeling, and before I knew it, the exam day was here. So, exam day. You can hear some of it right now in the background. Of course, by no means was this playthrough perfect, but I'm proud at what I had overcome to get to this point. This was only the first out of 2 semesters I did Harpsichord Continuo for, but undoubtedly the first semester of Continuo was the worst for me to adapt to Baroque pitch. Continuo and learning partimento, as well as improvising ornaments, were actually really fun once I got the hang of the tuning issues. To quickly sum up the second semester, I want to say that I absolutely smacked the Baroque tuning in its face and was able to do the shift, but I don't know, I couldn't, even after an extra semester. The best I could do was try my best to ignore the pure pitch sound and unfocus, instead going by muscle memory and fingers in combination with, like, a general loose sense of relative direction. After 2 semesters, it still feels like walking across a tightrope, where if I don't constantly practice this in 415 tuning, I'd lose this feeling and revert back to 440. I feel like being able to switch this 440, 415 kind of thing on and off and jump between is different from that time I was forcefully swapped perfect pitch from that wisdom tooth removal. For those with perfect pitch, let me know if you've ever had your pitch shift too from situations like this. I know it's definitely a thing for older people over a certain age. There's this video by Adam Neely where he points to studies which show that past a particular age, your perfect pitch will most likely shift permanently, which is a sobering thought to realize. I'm very thankful that I had a taste in what it was like during this wisdom tooth shift arc, and I also feel like I have a hint now of how I might not sink into another unmotivated, very gloomy mood if I'm older and my perfect pitch shifts permanently this time. Anyways, I never would have expected that these 8 months would be like this. When I started filming and this experiment, I thought it was just going to be a cringe compilation of me getting dunked on the entire time by Baroque pitch. Instead, it turned out to be quite a journey of self-discovery, both in my fascination with continuo, improvising, and partimento, but also with my findings on how I can get through this Baroque tuning, as well as surprisingly finding a path for relative pitch and transposition. So, to answer the title of this video, can perfect pitch survive Baroque tuning? I'd say yeah.